No, I think we might actually be live. So welcome into Operation Domination. We're having just a little preview, guys. I mean, it's our last show. It's a Super Bowl we're talking about. We're closing off the 24-25 season. And, our studio lab here decided to take a crap on us. So we can't see anything. We can't get our drops. We can't get anything going. So, but hopefully you are there live. We're not just talking into the ether. And we'll be able to get a great show for you to cap off this wonderful 24-25 season. Kick it off the rip. I mean, we are going to have, Chas Filardi is going to be on later of Sports Betting Weekly. Of course, we're going to be talking bets and player props for the Super Bowl. We'll get into all of that to kick off the show. As we always do, we're going to have Dynasty Domination, DFS Cocktail Hour, and of course, there's a little breaking news I wanted to start off the show with, off the top, kind of get your guys' reaction to some of this, and it's kind of a prelude to what we're going to be doing, when we do come back in March. By the way, for those of you wondering what our schedule is going to be in the offseason, I can tell you that tentatively, I would say March 5th, which is Wednesday at 9:30, we would likely be back with a Coaching Changes Impact episode. That's going to be the week before the free agency kicks off for the NFL. So it's only going to be a month long. That's all you're going to do to miss us, but it gives us a month to kind of get things situated and see what new things Operation Domination will have in store for you on the Fantasy Football Advice Network. So the kick off the top, Cooper Kupp. Rumor is he's going to be traded. Rams talking about they want to trade him as soon as humanly possible. Like, we're not waiting around to free agency to figure out what's going on and everything else like that. So, Chris, when you're looking at Cooper Kupp, let's first examine it from the angle of where else could he go that would be a fantasy boost or even fantasy equalizer to what his value is staying on the Rams, or is there even such a team?
I'm not quite sure if there's such a team, Dan. I mean, what we've seen Cooper Kupp with Matthew Stafford and that connection, that might be irreplaceable. But I think we can get back to a more productive Cooper Kupp, especially one we saw towards the end of the season when he basically got phased out of the Rams offense. Some of the places I think would be a good fit for him might be the Texans. We know Nico Collins is on the one side, but Tank Dell's banged up on the other side. Who knows what's going to happen with Stephon Diggs? They might have a little bit of money to play around with. Washington's been floated out there as another team that might be a good fit for him. If that possession receiver, you saw Zacchaeus, you saw Brown have some bigger games. McLaurin's on his last year of his deal, so maybe it's kind of like a guy that can maybe filter that role. And then they kind of looking around a little bit more. I think what you're going to look for is there a chance to maybe wind up on one of these, top quarterback teams like a Kansas City Chiefs, for example, when we see the Super Bowl. We know they have Worthy, they have Rice, but they might not bring back Marquise Brown. They could have some money with losing Hopkins probably off the off season. So it's an easy kind of contract to kind of extend in and out. So some of those fits, I think, could be places where you could see Cooper Kupp get back on track and become a guy who's worth, value in fantasy versus the guy we kind of saw at the end of the season was being phased out of the offense.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be hard. Like, we not only do you have, like, Chris, to your point, like you said, like replacing the chemistry between Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp that we've seen over the last few years, that's going to be hard to do, if not impossible to do. But to top it all off, yes, part of this conversation is the big cap number that Cooper Kupp is staring at for the Los Angeles Rams. Understandable, but I found this kind of weird. They're like, yeah, we got to move this off now. Like, we want to move this off as soon as possible. Now, I know they're trying to set up their off season, but it almost kind of makes me feel like let's move off him while people still might think he has value. I mean, Chase, when you think of it from that standpoint, do you think Rams are just trying to get out of, Dodge way, basically, when it comes to Cooper Kupp? Do they think he's maybe just cooked and that's why they're trying to move on?
Yeah, you're right. It was a weird thing that all of a sudden Super Bowl week, it came out like, oh, we got to do this now. We got to do this now. We got to do this now. And why would you, I don't know, why would you announce that and kind of give up your leverage in a way too? Because I mean, now other teams know that you are actively looking to get rid of him rather than just, appearing to let a deal happen organically. They sure seemed to sour on him towards the end of the year, at least in terms of how much he was utilized in that offense, like Chris was saying. And maybe it is just a case of, they know him better than anybody else does. He's in their building every day. It is a weird deal though, that it came up so sudden. It seems like so urgent rather than just like, oh yeah, we didn't get any leaks that were like, oh, well, Cooper Kupp may be on the way out there. Or, they may look to move on from, it wasn't like that. It was like this guillotine drop that happened.
Yeah, it was so strange that Sam. And look, he's 32. He will be 33, coming off of a handful now of seasons where he's been banged up and has missed games on top of it. So dynasty wise, I mean, if Adam was here, he'd be telling you like, look, you're probably not even going to sell him for much because most dynasty owners realize he's not going to have much value, even for the teams that are trying to win now, because his value is only going to decrease when he does leave the Rams. Redraft purposes next year, I think Cooper Kupp's going to be one of those guys that we're talking about maybe somewhere in the 8th to 10th round, frankly, in home draft leagues, depending upon where he winds up. So I just say all that to say, unfortunately, I think fantasy-wise, we may have just seen the decline of Cooper Kupp off of our boards to at least some degree here. And it's a shame because it's one of the most electric wide receivers, but our hats off to him for a great career nonetheless. We'll see what happens. Of course, more things to talk about in the offseason. Two other things to note that I just kind of wanted to mention here. We don't have to get into it too deeply, although one I am going to want your guys' reaction on. But first, Nick Caley, passing game coordinator Sean McVay disciple, he takes the Texans OC job. So they went from taking a Shanahan disciple in Bobby Slowick, who was the passing game coordinator for Shanahan, and now taking the McVay passing game coordinator here in Nick Caley. So interesting little move there. Similar systems, but we do know McVay more comes from the tree of the old Shanahan tree where they pass a little bit more, at least put a little more emphasis on the pass game. So I wonder if that is a move where the Houston Texans are trying to build more around Stroud. The one I want your guys' reaction, though, real quick, because this just blew my mind. Chip Kelly taking the offensive coordinator job for the Raiders. Like, how is this guy back in the NFL right now? Just completely blew my mind. But I want you guys to react to this. So, Chris, go ahead.
Making $6 million on top of it, Dan. A guy that was basically kicked out of UCLA. They didn't want him in UCLA. Couldn't get a sniff anywhere, and suddenly he's one of the highest paid offensive coordinators in the game. This makes absolutely no sense to me. I look at the Raiders team in general, the move they made. I didn't hate the Pete Carroll move, but the more and more things are just really head-scratching with this team. I don't know what Chip Kelly's going to bring to them. I know that people were trying to give him credit for what he did for Ohio State. He had an all-star team basically on the offense to play with. Yes, it got better. Yes, it was semi-efficient, but you're not going to have nearly that talent gap on that offense for that Raiders team. And on top of it, the last time I've seen him feature a tight end is when in any of his offenses, their best weapon is Brock Bowers. I do not like the Chip Kelly hiring at all. That
was my immediate reaction because we're all on board that Brock Bowers is the tight end one now until further notice, and Chip Kelly just pours a little cold water on. Like, I don't think he's gonna just not use Brock Bowers, but this is an Arthur Smith situation where even your star player kind of goes to die. It wouldn't shock me. And the only thing on the Chip Kelly offense I would trust, Chase, is a running back, something the Raiders don't have right now. We'll see what happens over the course of the offseason, of course, but he also needs a quarterback who's able to do RPO, or at least that's the only way his offense worked when he was in the NFL. So now we have that on top of you. Have Aiden O'Connell right now, the moment Gardner Minshew. We don't know if Raiders were one of the teams I think we were pinning on that either they get Sam Darnold or they're probably going to miss out on any real tangible quarterback upgrades, frankly, from what's going to be out there because of where they're drafting at and what's going to be available in free agency after Sam Darnold. And now you bring in Chip Kelly to the mix. It blew my mind. What was your reaction here?
I'd feel better about any coordinator hire that they would have made. Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have repaired their relationship. He might go there. A lot of speculation, but we don't have any concrete answers. And honestly, I don't like any of them necessarily with Chip Kelly at the helm. I'm just as shocked as you guys were when I saw that. To me, it screamed a Mark Davis thing. Unless this is really how Tom Brady wants to run his show, if it is his show now. But I was floored by that hire. I thought we'd finally seen the last of him in the Shield, and I guess not. So,
go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say real quick, the Tom Brady point, Chase, this is something that you can tie back to the Patriots. Chip Kelly was held very high esteem, I should say, by Tom Brady and Belichick. They would go to meet with them in the offseason quite often to talk about offenses, so this might have a Brady's prints on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Grindberg chiming in here, Jackson Dart Raiders 2025. Why don't you just Aiden O'Connell 2.0? There, yeah, it's fine. Let's just do the same thing all over and over again. That doesn't work either in Chip Kelly.
Don't disrespect Aiden O'Connell like that.
It's fair. It's fair. Yeah. So a lot of that stuff. So like the coaching impact, again, that's what we're going to probably kick off our offseason 2025, 2026 season there in March. So we'll get more deep into it. So Chris, I want to turn to you because we want to talk a little bit of Dynasty before we officially kick off into the offseason later on here. What do you got for, I know Adam's not here right now, but what do you got for, oh, wait, I take that back. Adam is in the building. What's up, Adam? Almost missed you. Just in time. Chris and Adam, take it away for Dynasty.
Well, as Adam joins us, one of the things we were just talking about is the pass catchers. And we're going to spot some of the pass catchers on our shopping list as we go into this off season. And first, as Adam joins us, Adam, I'm looking for some guys that were on our shopping list that maybe you have as a sleeper at the receiver or tight end, or maybe a buy low candidate. Is there any guys who jump out to you that you're looking for as that sleeper or buy low candidate, the tight end or receiver position going into next year? And while Adam adjusts, I'm not sure if he can hear me.
I think Adam's crazy. Wait,
can you hear me now?
We can sort of. Good, talk again. Oh man. Yeah, Adam, why don't you hop back in? Because hop back in because you're like on a 20-minute delay. But okay, Chris, so go ahead, ask me your question.
Well, I can ask you the question, Dan, but you'll get your feedback. One of the guys that I can throw out there is a guy that we're going to see in Super Bowl Sunday. Hasn't got a lot of playing time, missed most of the season, but we saw as the playoffs progressed, he got more involved in the offense. A guy who's actually being used a lot in the slot, and that's Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown was a guy that a lot of people were high on going into this year. Had the injury like I talked about, but it's not an injury necessarily that's going to be something that's going to prevent him from running fast and being what he brings to the table. And he saw a legit connection with him and Patrick Mahomes. It was something they glowed about a lot this offseason. Whether it's in Kansas City or moving forward, Marquise Brown to me is a guy that you could buy low. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, look, Marquise Brown's been somebody, look, regardless, he's been injured now last 2 seasons in a row. I don't know if Marquise Brown can even stay healthy at this point. Could you buy low on him? Sure, in the sense of I don't think it would take much capital to gain him. Has he shown that he can produce when on the field before? Yeah, but Marquise Brown's also getting older now at this point too. So on top of that, I don't know how much of an asset it is. I really want to go out of my way to go get an older aging player who depends on his speed, who's been hurt quite often over the past couple of seasons. That's kind of how I see it there for that. I think we have Adam back though, so maybe Adam could chime in.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
All right, sweet. Yeah, Hollywood Brown is a tough one. He's someone I've liked over a long period of time and who's been a really good separator over the course of his career. I think if he does find a spot where he's able to be used in a slot or flanker role, I think he's going to be all right. I think it's just the challenge of teams trying to shove him at X and put him in, not necessarily the best situations for him to win. I don't think that he's necessarily going to be the receiver that he's been at periods of time. But I think at market value, especially with the lost season, there's probably something to be gained, but I think that there's potentially bigger swings that we can make.
Well, let's talk about some of the bigger swings that maybe you want to make.
Yeah. So, speaking of an older guy, if we're looking at not necessarily a deep sleeper, but someone who is way down in the rankings, we're talking a tight end. I believe 32 on Keep Trade Cut is Zach Ertz, and he's someone that I think is more than worth tight end 32. I think he is likely going to be someone that at least on bye weeks you're starting in your fantasy leagues, moving up a little bit. Theo Johnson is not valued very highly from a dynasty perspective at the moment, and is someone who I would be shocked if he's not the starting tight end for the Giants going into camp. Marvin Mims is to me a very strong swing. I think, look, I know none of us necessarily trust Sean Payton in terms of Marvin Mims getting the role that he's capable of. But the fact remains that no matter what metric you're really going to look at and find, he's going to jump out as you as someone that you should be targeting, whether it's separation, whether it's yards per route run, whether it's targets towards the end of the season. Like, it's hard to not want to buy into that guy because everything from a statistical projection standpoint, it's pointing really solidly up for him, and he's still I think like wide receiver 50 or so on Keep Trade Cut, even after jumping quite a few spots over the last month of the season or so.
All right, so we talked about some guys that maybe we like. Dan and I disagree about Marquise Brown. Adam seems to kind of tend to be cautious, but some guys maybe buy into. Adam just definitely shouted out. Moving on, Adam, talking about this draft that we have coming up. First of all, we're going to hit the biggest question on the board, and where do we value this player? Travis Hunter, and the guy is going to be a conundrum what position he plays in the NFL. When you're drafting him for fantasy, where are you valuing and where are you willing to take Travis Hunter?
He's a really tough one for me because a lot of the things that I value, I think you guys know this. I'm big on separation. I'm big on yards per route run. I'm big on, candidly, a lot of statistics and pieces of the analytical puzzle that he was not particularly strong at, especially last season. So it's hard to build a large sample, or rather a season ago. This past season, they got a little bit better, but still not extraordinary. It's hard to deny that he's a fantastic athlete, and it's hard to deny that he has fantastic ball skills. So I'm not going to say that I would never roster him, but I think he's someone that I'm going to be priced out of in pretty much every league where he becomes available, assuming that wide receiver is the path that he takes.
Well, I'm going to put you on kind of a more of a definitive answer for me. Where are you willing to take him in that first round, or are you willing to take him in the first round? What kind of draft capital would you be willing to spend on Travis Hunter?
Gosh, okay, so it's after Tet, it is after Ward, it is after Genty for sure. To be honest with you, I would be more intrigued by like a Golden. A couple of these other receivers, just being frank, I think they speak to me more again in their profile and my ability to project them to the next level again. We've seen guys who have great athleticism, great ball skills, and that's all they need. But it's not a high hit rate. It just isn't. I think he has a better chance than any of those other guys. Again, he's a freak of nature, and if there's anyone that's going to be an exception, it's him. But I just try not to make a living betting on exceptions, so he's not someone that I'm looking at in the top 6 picks for sure. When we get to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, talk about it, but that's the range for me.
So talking about that first round, go ahead, Dan.
Real quick. Would it be fair? And this is what I kind of think is interesting about this draft coming up. Would it be fair to say once you get past the Tyler Warren pick, then why not take your shot on a Travis Hunter? Because when I look at the first round, you said top 6 picks. That's usually about Tyler Warren. They're either sitting at 5 or 6. There's a big drop off for me. There's depth in this rookie class, but there is not a lot that makes you super excited towards the top right now, this rookie draft class. And I'm kind of with you, Adam, when it comes to Travis Hunter, because I think it's really hard to project him a guy that we don't know is going to be a full-time wide receiver. And it's a different ball game in the NFL if you're playing 2 positions. But is that about the range you're looking at?
Yeah, I think so. But to that point, it is because of this draft class. So I said a lot of negative things about him and still told you I would take him after 6. And it's because of how I feel about the rest of this class. It is not, I'm a little I'm concerned about at least making that gamble. But in this class, there's not much better to bet on, especially I can say all that I want about separation, about yards per route run, about quarterback QBR percentiles, right? Like I can say all of those things. Draft capital is a massive predictor in this whole equation too. He's going to get drafted before any of these other guys. Let's just be honest with ourselves. So that has to weigh in at least a little bit.
So talking about those pass catchers, Adam, some of the guys that maybe you do value in the first round that you want to kind of shout out. Is there a particular guy that you're super excited to spend your first round pick on, whether it's a tight end position or the receiver position?
Yeah, I think Warren is the big one. I would love to land Warren. I think he's going to be a really great tight end in this league. I think he is just as athletic, maybe not quite Theo Johnson, but very much so fits the mold of what we've come to expect from Penn State tight ends, but is a much more refined receiver, moves a lot better. He's not, the aircraft carrier we saw out of Theo Johnson last season when it came to turning corners and running routes. I think he's a more complete player. Getting in not quite a first round pick, at least I wouldn't expect it to be. But Tez Johnson is someone that probably around the turn, I'm hoping I'm going to be able to take a gamble on. We'll see what the draft capital ends up being, but he's someone who I know the size is tough, but I really do see someone who's comparable to Tank Dell in so many ways, whether it's the separation, the yards per route run, just the overall profile that I see has great athleticism, and I the reports out of the exhibition games this past week were really good. So I'm excited to look at him.
I was so excited he jumped ahead of the question and gave you guys Tez Johnson as this maybe a second or third round guy that kind of look at maybe as that value could be your Tank Dell steal, hopefully. And then finally, Adam, for our last question, looking at some sleepers or maybe some other guys that you like as a pass catcher in this draft that maybe we didn't mention. Maybe these guys are going in the third, fourth, fifth round, maybe even priority free agents. But there's guys that maybe you want to kind of shout out that you're starting to catch your eye at the pass catching positions.
Yeah, so this isn't a position that I'm completely done with by any means. It's exactly to what Dan said earlier. It's a little shallow at the top, but it is very deep. There's a lot of names to know, a lot of names that you give an opportunity to. Some other guys, of course, I've liked and talked about Miko Ibuka for a long time. I think he's a professional wide receiver, and I don't mean that in the way that sometimes we make fun of guys on this show. I mean that in the sense that, look, is there any singular skill that is A plus? No, there isn't. But he is well-rounded. He does all of the things you want from an NFL receiver. He's going to have a starting role somewhere. Jaden Higgins, I think, is someone who I was really impressed with how he moves for his size, and I think that there's some ball skills with him that I'm really excited to see at the next level. And then the last name I'll give you is Xavier Restrepo from Miami, who I think is a possession type of guy, who is more than that, but I think that's his primary skill set. It offers a lot as well.
Yeah, some guys that just throw out there to also kind of do some tape and some follow-up on as you build your dynasty teams, I suggest is Trey Harris from Ole Miss, a guy who I absolutely love. I think is going to be a stud receiver. People are kind of sleeping on him. Jack Starks is quarterback. Remember that when you're talking about separation rates, it's hard to separate when a guy can't reach you. It's also another guy to throw out there in a similar vein, who's kind of pigeonholed as only a deep threat, but also shined out at the Senior Bowl, is Jalen Royals from Utah State. People are going to point out they went to a small school. Jalen Royals can do everything on the field that you want him to do. He can separate, he can run different routes, and he's absolutely a burner when he turns it on. This is a guy I think is going to be a stud, and it could be sneaking into day two conversations, maybe day one, I'm hearing, as he kind of progress moving forward. And then kind of the tight end positions we didn't really talk about a lot. Gunnar Helm, Ferguson, there's a lot of different guys that are kind of in those mid-tier rounds that are going to be value for you. That's why I myself am not a Hal Fanning Jr. guy from Bowling Green, guy who I think is 6'4", 230. But there's going to be a lot of different pass catchers. You have Randy Gatson from Syracuse, who's a pass catcher. You have John Michael Gollenberg from Wyoming, who's 6'5", 250, has a better skill set. But if you're looking for a guy who's going to catch the ball and be a beast on the field, a lot of other guys who I think have tantalizing skill sets that I would be looking for instead of just kind of spend premium picks on Hal Fanning Jr. And then finally, you talked about Jaden Higgins. Don't forget his teammate Joe Noel, Iowa State guy who's a lot like Jalen McMillan. You guys saw this Tampa Bay towards the end of the season for Tampa Bay kind of shine out. I think he's able to kind of play the slot and also the outside. A bigger build can make things happen with the ball in his hands, and it's going to be a guy who I think can creep up boards. He might be a sneaky guy going into the second half of next year. So there's just some of the guys that are kind of paying attention to. I'm excited about the receiver class and the tight ends. You guys are right. There's not a lot of guys in the top half necessarily that we talked about. Tedoro McMillan, we know is going to, I think, is a top receiver in my board. I would take him over Tyler Warren, but there's a lot of guys that we're excited about, and we're going to be back for our draft specials moving forward. But back to you, Dan.
No, I cannot wait to get into our draft competition. And don't worry, Chris, we'll be having a showdown over Harold Fannin. But it's time for my thirst to get quenched. Let's go to the DFS cocktail hour with Chase Thornton. Chase, what are you making for us tonight, man?
Well, hey, it's Super Bowl week. You can't hold anything back, like Dan Fouts said. So we're going to put everything out there on the table and put everything in the cocktail this week. We're going to make a Long Island iced tea. Easy enough to make, easy to drink, and it's strong enough that you won't need too many of these if the game gets away from us and we end up bored out of our minds like we do occasionally here in the Super Bowl. But This week, with only the two teams playing, the DraftKings slate is a little different in terms of the games that they're offering, the game types that they offer. So this week, we're going to play the Showdown Captain mode. If you're not familiar with that, you pick 6 players of any position, including the kickers, Team DST. You're not locked into taking a specific number of any position like in the normal classic games. So if you don't want to play a running back, that's definitely a strategy, I guess, but you're free to do so, and you can do you and not play any. The captain part of things, okay, comes in because you have to choose one of your players to place in the captain slot. That player is going to cost you 1.5 times their salary, but you're also going to get 1.5 times their points scored. So you can pay big if you want to put a big gun type of player in there. But in my opinion, you really limit what you can do with the rest of the roster there. So when you're doing these single game lineups, the real key is to ask yourself how you see the game going, and then you bet that scenario with your lineup. We've talked about that before on this show, last few weeks here. We align prop bets to fit each other and fit our narrative of what we think a game's going to do. So if you think a quarterback has a great passing day, it makes sense that you think at least one of his pass catchers is also going to have a day. And with that in mind, I am in on the Eagles in this game. I think they're the better team overall, and I think they're the better offense with the better overall weapons. So I want pieces of the Eagles offense. It's a bold statement, but I think it's true. And especially the way that they're performing right now. So I'm starting with Jalen Hurts right off the bat. He's at 10,400 this week. He's the more expensive of the two quarterbacks, but he's just been so good at getting into the end zone on the ground. We all know about the tush push. He's coming off a game where he got 3 rushing touchdowns. He's got 4 games with multiple rushing scores this year. I like him to have a nice passing day too against the Chiefs defense. It allowed the 10th most points to opposing fantasy quarterbacks. So we're going to plug Jalen Hurts in. Then we are taking Saquon. How can you not with how he's performed this season? He's got 442 rushing yards in his postseason games right now, 5 touchdowns in his past 2 games. We saw all year he can still get his, even if Hurts is scoring in a game. Okay. So I'm not worried about them vulturing off of each other. Chiefs were tough on running backs. They were second only to the Eagles in fewest points allowed to running backs, but Saquon has just been on another level. And I'm willing to pay for him, even with a $12,000 price tag that makes him the most expensive player to roster on DraftKings this week. So we're going to keep right on flying then with the Eagles, and we are going to take A.J. Brown at 9,600. Chiefs allowed the 8th most points to wide receivers this season. Brown caught the only passing score for the Eagles last week. He's seen 15 combined targets in the past 2 games. He's the most expensive wide receiver, but I think he's worth it for how I see this game playing out. And then we are going all in on the Eagles offense, and we're going to get all 4 levels of that offense. That's right. We're going to play Dallas Goedert for 5,800. He's off the injury report. He's going to be good to go Sunday against the Chiefs team that gave up the 3rd most points to tight ends. He's caught 15 of 18 targets so far this postseason, including 7 of 8 last week. He had a touchdown against Green Bay in the wild card round. Hurts has been looking his way this postseason, and Goddard has been responding. In fact, last week was his 2nd best game of the whole season. Okay, he had 85 yards receiving on top of those 7 catches. So 4 down, 2 to go. We don't have any Chiefs yet, but before we get to the last 2 slots, we're going to get this drink going. As I said, we're making a Long Island iced tea this week, so we've got ice in our shaker. These are going to be quick pours, but we are going to add a 1/2 ounce each of vodka and white rum right here. Then we're going to go with gin and tequila. And then we are going to add a 1/2 ounce of triple sec. So 5 different alcohols in that drink, but it really doesn't taste as boozy as it seems here. Okay. On top of that, we're going to add 1 ounce of lemon juice that I've got pre-poured here. We're also going to do a 1/2 ounce of honey right there. That pours a little bit slower, so we'll use the spoon to help us out with that. So then I mentioned here that we don't have any Chiefs pass catchers or anybody on the Chiefs so far. Okay. But while I give this a shake, do any of you guys out there have anyone that you're really hopped up about? Either an Eagle you would like to take off the board, or you think I should take off the board, or do you have any suggestions for who we should play for from the Chiefs here?
Well, I'll hop in there. So 2 things. One, Saquon Barkley, I know he's going to be the most common captain played player, but my best player needs to be my captain played player. So that's why I have a little bit different. But because of that, Chase, You can't put A.J. Brown really into your lineup if you have Jalen Hurts and you have Dallas Goedert. Two guys I agree with you need to be in your lineups coming up this week. But what you can do is if you go that route, you can put in Xavier Worthy at $8,000. You could put in Harrison Butker at $5,800. Something guys don't think about a lot, but kickers, especially when we have these showdowns, is a nice little way to go. And to wrap it all up, I know he's on your list, so I'm going to spoil it for you a little bit, but we have to go cheap. And if I'm going to go cheap, I want to go with the guy who has the best chance of giving me a out of nowhere touchdown. And that, to me, in my opinion, would be Noah Gray at $2,800. So that's how I kind of fill out my lineup in that sense, and that's where I incorporate the Chiefs. But I'm kind of with you on we need to go Hurts, we need to go Saquon, we need to go Dallas Goedert in this matchup.
Yeah, and I hear you there about putting your best guy in your captain slot. My only problem with that is if you put a guy that costs that much in your captain slot, you're really paying down. I think you limit yourself farther down the roster. Like I said, you put a very good case forward here, but I am going to go with Xavier Worthy at 8,000 because, like I said, we talked about the narrative for the game. If the Eagles are doing as well as I'm betting on, the Chiefs are going to be throwing, and if they're throwing, I want their best pass catching option, who I think is their best pass catching option for this game, in Xavier Worthy at 8,000. Like you said, Philly has a tough defense, but out of the big four, fantasy positions, they were most vulnerable at wide receiver. Worthy has caught 11 out of 13 targets through 2 games this postseason. That actually improves on his usage in the regular season. He averaged between 5 and 6 targets a game. He only caught 60% of the passes thrown his way. So he's actually performed and stepped up here in the playoffs. It's been a nice showing for the rookie there. You can't coach speed. He's got that in bunches. And I don't really trust any of the rest of Kansas City's wideouts. For the projections I'm looking at, Worthy actually grades out as one of the absolute best values for the price of anyone. I like Kelsey, but Buffalo was able to take him away. He's got a high price tag for $9,000. I'm going to steer clear of him. So now the piece that makes it all possible for me, we haven't talked about my captain yet, but we spent real big on the first 5 guys to try and build ourselves this unstoppable juggernaut, right? Based on my narrative for the game, I want to have another Chiefs pass catcher, but he's got to be cheap. So I am going to plug in, as you brought up, Noah Gray, and I'm putting him in my captain slot. That way I can afford all the other guys that I picked up that I want to watch, right? Now, Noah Gray, in all likelihood, he's not going to outperform Travis Kelce in this game, I don't think. All right. Honestly, he might not outperform Samaje Perine, who's cheaper and also would be a viable option for you if you're looking to fill out lineups. But can I see a game script, say, where Noah Gray catches 2 balls on 3 targets for 16 yards? Yes. Then can I also see one of those catches being a 4-yard touchdown because the Chiefs are in desperation mode and Cooper DeJean is stuck to Kelsey and Gray's an afterthought for the Eagles defense on, say, 2nd and goal? Absolutely. He hasn't been great lately, but, like I said, you might be tempted to plug Saquon or one of the quarterbacks in as your captain, and you can get good points from him, but I don't like how it limits you further down a lineup. I want to be able to see my biggest dogs eat. I want to have a lineup with the biggest dogs in the contest, and I think I did that. And rather than having to use 3 mediocre plays or 2 mediocre plays down the line because Saquon's taken up over 1/3 of my salary cap, I'm going to use the one lesser guy who still, like I said, the way I see the game playing out, has a path to a respectable score. Plus, it's going to differentiate me a little bit. I don't think there's going to be a ton of Gray in the captain slot. And if I'm right on the game script and I get lucky with a Gray score, I should be quite literally in the money on that one. But we shook that up. We added Coke to taste on there. You can put, some people say just a splash or an ounce. It's really however much you want in there to make it taste the way you want it. But we are going to garnish that with a lemon there to look all fancy and a fresh mint sprig because sprigs are always fun. There's your Long Island iced tea. Cheers, everybody. Have fun watching that Super Bowl, but let's hope you cash out here.
Let's hope you cash out. Let's hope you cash tickets because now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Mr. Chas Filardi, Sports Betting Weekly, going to get us some money for the Super Bowl. Chas, how's it going, brother?
Well, you may remember how I started the last show we were together. And I had the most incredible Vegas trip of my career. And I've had a pretty good career, but it was unbelievable. Kelsey didn't get in the end zone, right? I had 6 of 7 of my touchdowns scored I had a 4-teamer to pay 20-1. I actually got up off my table and danced that time. Otherwise, they were saying, you're not even acting like you're winning, which is kind of my thing because, until you win in the end of the game. I hit every single play in the first game. I hit all 3 touchdowns in the first half when Brown, I said, I need Brown, and I'm done. I swept the board in the first half, and he scored with 2 minutes left in the first half. I hit every single bet in the second game because I just won with the overs. And I hit both half times. I literally, the only bet I lost was Kelsey. And then my son calls me and says, hey, could you bet? I was all over Washington, Dad. Do you have an extra couple $100? I want to bet Kansas City in the over on the money line. And I actually had an extra couple $100. So it was just an incredible time. But I'm laughing because I'm thinking about the Chase making the drink. And we probably had, I don't know, we had a pile where the drink tickets were sliding off the top of the pile. They wouldn't stay neat, But the one thing we didn't have is we didn't have a Long Island iced tea, but we sure felt like we did.
Of course, talking about the big Vegas trip that you had a couple of weeks ago to that conference championship week. Yeah, we had a really good week, man, player prop wise and all. And I'm hoping that we can cap off, a 24-25 fantastic season with one last group of winners. We've talked about the Chiefs, talked about the Eagles, of course, throughout this process. And right now, the Chiefs are favored. It should come as no surprise that they're favored in this moment, but it's only a 1.5 point spread. So it's as close to a pick 'em as you're going to get in any kind of Super Bowl with the over-under sitting at 48.5. These are 2 evenly matched teams. Now, I don't think, and maybe somebody on this panel could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think anybody on this panel thinks that the Chiefs, top to bottom, on the roster, on paper, are the more talented team. But then you have the Patrick Mahomes factor, where it's, hey, you know what? If it's down to 1 score and it's in the fourth quarter, he may just pull it out. And when you're betting a 1.5 point spread, you're basically, it's as close to, like I said, it's as close to the money line as you're going to get. Now, in this situation, I typically, regardless of past trends, in a big game like this, would bet the better team. And that is exactly what I'm going to do here. So I'm taking the Eagles on the money line in this game, even though it has not been profitable to bet against Patrick Mahomes the last few years in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. So before Chas is going to give me his full breakdown on the quarters and everything you're looking at, because that's what Chas does. I want to get these other 3 guys' reactions to who they think is going to win this game. Who are you placing your money on in this one? Adam, let's start with you.
Oh, yeah, I tend to agree that it is difficult to bet against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and that's not something that I'm going to be doing.
So Adam is going with the Chiefs, putting his shekels there. Chase, what do you got?
Well, like I said during the cocktail segment there, I am in on the Eagles here. I think they can score in this one. I think that they play well, and I think they take it. I really do. I know that it's the Patrick Mahomes factor, and you can never count him out. And I don't think you're going to be able to count him out until the very end. But I do think the Eagles pull this one out and get a measure of revenge there.
Oh, we got a little believer. Chris, are we making a believer out of you?
Yeah, I want to believe. I think if it's going to be a 2-score game, I absolutely love the Eagles. But if it's going to be a 1-score game, I'm sorry, the Chiefs haven't lost one of those in 17 straight games. I don't see it changing for anything. If it's going to be by the book, we're going by the numbers Vegas shows. Chas loves to talk about Vegas' numbers, but they usually are pretty close. If it's going to be a 1-score game, I got to stick with the Chiefs. I go with the better coaching staff. Dan, I like the Patrick Mahomes factor, but I think there's better coaching on the Chiefs sidelines, both offensively, defensively. I think the game plan you saw versus Buffalo is going to be a tough game plan for that Eagles defensive game plan against. I think opposite why I think the Chiefs defense realizes Saquon's the key. They can kind of contain him. It's going to get interesting.
Well, the quarterback Mahomes, the coaching staff, sure, I can see that argument. The biggest factor might be that they had the better refs on her sideline too, but that's neither here nor there for this show. Here's the beauty, and this is why I kick it back, Chaz. You might say, why do we give the Super Bowl predictions first? Because, well, there's other ways to win. You might not be an Eagles fan, a Chiefs fan. You might not want to bet this game because it is so close on these game lines. That's what Chaz and I are going to do for you. So Chaz always breaks down his halves, his quarters, and everything like that. And I got player props, so we got to talk about. But Chaz, I want to kick this to you, man. So when you look at this game, what is sticking out to you in the data that we can capitalize on?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, as they say, because I did have someone ask me, who the hell do you have last week? Because I was rooting for the over, so I was cheering for everybody. And it confuses people because, as you know, 90% of the people have a side, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, so here's what we got. I broke it down I do it the same way every year. I just add the playoffs now. So I got regular season, and then I've got away because they're both away. And so the matchup, there's not home and away. This is an away and away. And then I got the playoffs, and it's the playoff numbers that make me think that, it ain't going to be a fly Eagles fly weekend. That's what I'm thinking. So here's what I got. Kansas City in the first quarter, in their last 7 are 6-1 against the spread, 5 straight overs. They've allowed 3 or less in 10 of 12. In the first half this year, they ended the season on a 6-1 against the spread run. And now, remember, the Denver game is in here. So I didn't throw it out, but you can throw it out if you want. And then it's 6-0, but it's 6-1 against the spread. And they scored 13 plus in 6 of 7. And guess what? They didn't score against Denver. In the second half, they're under in 6 straight. That was a winner in the Buffalo game. Buffalo and the under was the second half parlay that I cashed in the second game. And to finish for the game, they're 5-1 against the spread. On the road, in the first half, they've scored 13 plus in 6 of 7. Again, the Denver game was the one they didn't. They've allowed 10 or less in 6 of 8. And the 2 they didn't were Denver and Buffalo. And again, holding Buffalo to under 10 points is a tough thing. In the second half, under in 10 of 12. And they're 1-4-1 against the spread in the second half on the road in their last 6. Under in 3 straight. And they've scored 21 plus in 6 of 7. Again, the one they didn't was the Denver game. Philadelphia, first quarter, 6-1 against the spread run. They're over 5-0-1. So they in the last 6 games, if you bet the over in the first quarter of the Eagles game, you won 5 times, and once they gave you your money back. They've scored 7 plus in 7 of straight games. 7 of 7. That's a trick, isn't it? Chase 7 and 7. Half one for 24. This is overall 12-2-1 against the spread. The Eagles are. I mean, 12-2. You tell somebody you're 12-2-1, and they're going to follow you. Second half, over 4 straight. They've scored 12 plus in 5 of 6. And for the game, in their last 5, they're 4-0-1 against the spread. They have scored 20 plus points in 16 straight games. On the road, Philly. First half, 6-0 against the spread. They've scored 10 plus in 6 of 6. In the second half, they scored 10 plus in 6 of 6 or 5-1 against the spread in those games. And for the game, in their last 6, they've scored 24 or more in 6 straight, and they're 5-1 against the spread. Those are great numbers. Here's the problem I have. It's the playoffs. It ain't a regular season game. So here's the playoff numbers. In the first quarter, Kansas City, in their last 8 playoff games, 7-1 against the spread. In the first half, they scored 13 or more and 11 of 12. You know, the one game they didn't do it was the Super Bowl last year. Remember? They had no points, and they won the game. Second half, under 8 of 10. For the game, they're 8-0 against the spread. In 8 straight playoff games they have covered. That's the one that jumps out. Oh, my God, when you see it in data, and it's just all these W's, W, 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 W. And that's not on the field. That's against the spread. And they scored 23 plus and 11 of 12. In the playoffs, the Eagles, in the first quarter, they've scored 7 plus and 6 of 7. They've been over in 7 of their last 8 in the first quarter, and they're 3-0 in their last 3 games in the playoffs against the spread in the first quarter. In the first half, they're over 6 of their last 7, and they're 5-1-1 against the spread. In the second half, they've scored 12 plus and 3 of 3 in their last 3 playoff games. They've all gone over in the second half. And for the game, they have scored 22 plus in 6 of 7. It's going to be a great game. The fact that I sell footballs and I'm only selling one, I wish I could sell both of these footballs. I wish both these teams could win.
Well, technically, you can sell those footballs. It just might not be for this year, but always go to championshipfootballs.com to check out your favorite team, especially if they have won a championship there. And Chas will definitely hook you up with a great gift.
No, I will say, I will say one thing. And, any idiot that says this, you say, of course, duh. Turnovers, right? Turnovers are the key. In the playoffs, Philly's plus 10. They've only played 3 games. They're plus 10. Now, again, Kansas City doesn't really give the ball up. So that plus 10 may not help them. But honestly, this is it. This is the game. Like Chris said, he said something about two touchdowns versus 1 touchdown. Where you turn the ball over, if you turn it over and where you turn it over, that's what makes a football game.
Yeah, it's close on paper with the rosters. It's close in the data, as you've just laid out. And, of course, it's close on the line. So Chas, you gave us a lot of great data there. If you had to outline 3 of your most favorite bets out of what you just gave us, what would be your 3 top bets for this weekend?
Over early, under later. So I would go first half over. I would go under at halftime. And my parlay, here's my 4-teamer. It's 15-1. Hurts, Barkley, Hunt, and Worthy. What I looked at in the last 3 years, the player that led the team in rushing touchdowns scored the first touchdown in most of those games. And it happened, of course, last week, right, with Barkley and Hurts. They led the team in rushing. They had 3 each. Now, I don't know, and I didn't look it up. Do any of you guys know what 3 or more touchdown parlay with those 2 guys paid?
No, not the top of my head. Did not see
it had to be a lot of numbers, right? Plus a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely. If they can pull off against the Chiefs, that might be the key for them winning. It's going to be a big thing, which kind of leads into the player props that I do have. And I tried to make as many good bets. I'm never going to give you fake bets. I'm always going to give you ones that I actually care about. I'm actually going to be putting my own money on, kind of like what Chas does. But I did come up with more bets that I actually felt good about than I thought I was necessarily going to have in a 1-game thing. And I'm also going to put this out there. I'm not a person who gives a rat's behind about some of these novelty prop bets that they put out there, these ridiculous ones that are off in the left corner, or even like betting the coin toss even is not something that I do. And I don't know. There's not, I'm looking for the probability to be in my favor, not to be 50-50. And that's why we go into the data. That's why we do what we do. So I'm sticking with my normal player props in this one. Should come as no surprise that and I'm going to get these guys involved too. Saquon Barkley at 115.5 rushing yards. I know technically speaking, he did not hit the over in the conference championship game, but he's still been over 115.5 rushing yards for 5 games in a row. And if the Eagles are going to win this game, and I don't think at the very least they're going to take the Buffalo Bills path of like, let's just not play James Cook, even though he's ripping off 7 yards carry. I do think Saquon Barkley going over this mark has a really good shot of happening. And I know the Chiefs were really good against the running backs in the regular season, I guess I should say. But in the last 2 weeks in the playoffs against Buffalo and against Houston, they've been allowing nearly 5 yards a carry, and they haven't faced an offensive line like the Eagles. They haven't faced a running back on the caliber of a Saquon Barkley. So I like Saquon here over 115.5 rushing yards. To kind of piggyback on that, Jalen Hurts, 34.5 rushing yards. Over on that. He's been over that 5 of the last 6 games anyway. And against the Commanders, where he had 16 rushing yards, he still ran 10 times in that game. So did he have the yards? No. But was the volume there? Yes. And Hurts using his legs along with Saquon, I think is going to be a big key against Kansas City, who did allow the 7th most rushing yards to the quarterback position in the regular season. So yeah, I am on Jalen Hurts over 34.5 rushing yards as well. So far, those 2 right there, just those 2 are off the bat. Chris, how are you feeling about Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, knowing that those are going to be the key ultimately in this game for the Eagles anyway?
Yeah, man, I think they're decent bets. The Saquon Barkley one's a little tough for me. I think the 115 yards, while we've seen it definitely happen, is definitely a higher number. Maybe he gets involved in passing attack, not just running the ball. So that's the one I maybe have a little bit of concern. Jalen Hurts, I think, will be the decent one. I think you talk about the rushing potential. He should have 2 weeks or 3 weeks now to kind of heal from that leg injury. I think that's a good one.
But even I thought about Saquon being more involved in the passing game, and I thought that was a potential possibility. I think we just lost at him, but I thought it was a potential possibility. But he's had 3 catches now. Oh, here we go. We were losing everybody there for a second.
I'm still here.
We're back. We're back. We had 3 catches now.
Well, while we were gone, I took time to look at the data, Dan, and listen to this. You're right on with this. You were right on. In the regular season, Kansas City allowed regular season. They allowed 100 yards a game. They're up to like almost $1.50 now in the playoffs. Whereas regular season, Philly ran for 180 yards a game. Led the league, I think, or second behind Baltimore. They've got 227 a game in the playoffs. So those numbers are right on top of you.
And it should be part of the big game plan. Now I have more Eagles that I actually want to talk about. One I think is going to be kind of interesting. This one shouldn't be shocking. Dallas Goedert, 52.5 receiving yards. I have the over on this one. So Goddard himself has been on a hot streak. He's been over this mark 3 of the last 4 games. And the one thing that's been consistently bad in Kansas City is covering the tight end. In fact, they gave up the most receiving yards to the tight end this season. Now this one, and I'm going to go to Chase on this one. This one I think is interesting. And I think it's ballsy, but it's too juicy for my opinion to pass up because you can hit a same game parlay on just 1 catch if it happens. Jahan Dotson, over 1.5 receiving yards and a half a reception. 1 catch for Jahan Dotson, you cash both. Now, he only has 1 catch in the playoffs so far. Yeah, that's part of it. But I'm willing to roll the dice because when we get to the Super Bowl, we get into these games, what they've done the last 2 weeks, they've game planned for the big contributors, right? They've game planned for Saquon. They've game planned for Hurts using his legs. They've game planned for A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. Those are the guys that are mainly on the radar when Spagnuolo puts his game plan together, not Jahan Dotson. And we've seen the Super Bowl when these guys, these complementary players, pop up for stretches in these Super Bowls. I think Dotson might get 1 catch. That's all I need him to do. Chase, what do you think?
Ooh, yeah, you want to look at unlikely. He wouldn't be a hero necessarily on the field, but he'd sure as hell be a hero to your pocketbook if that hits. But if you want to look at unlikely heroes, like look at last year, look at the winning play of the Super Bowl last season. Nobody expected that ball to go where it went either. So, when it's something that's that simple, that low, and like you said, we've seen this happen before where either guys get hurt or, they have to pull all the tricks out of the book. And, I bet on the same kind of thing in my DFS cocktail there by saying, hey, I'm going to put Noah Gray in my captain slot. I'm going to kind of bank on the fact that I think that he would be an afterthought in the red zone. I think that they would be concentrating more on Kelsey and Worthy and maybe even Juju Smith-Schuster, Samaje Perine if he's in. I think Gray can get lost in the shuffle, and I think he could score 1. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Jahan Dotson gets his butt on the field and actually gets open for, an 8-yard gain, a 13-yard gain on second.
He had a touchdown in the wild card game, didn't he?
I know he had 1 catch for 11 yards. I'm not sure if it was a touchdown or not off the top of my head.
His one catch of the postseason on 2 targets, an 11-yard touchdown against the Packers. Thank you. You're welcome. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Like you said, sometimes these obscure guys come through. I don't want to bank on them as part of like a lineup, but on a prop bet when it's only taking 1 catch to make it, I'd sprinkle a little bit that way.
Well, and I'm glad you talked about having his butt on the field because Jahan Dotson's been on the field. We're talking about a guy who's played 55% of the snaps through the playoffs. It's not like he hasn't been out there, just hasn't been targeted. So I thought it was a fun one. I wanted to throw that in there. I like that quite a bit. Now, the next one up, I got a parlay coming in here for the same player parlay. We got a Xavier Worthy at 59 half receiving yards. I have the over on that. He's been over 3 of the last 4 games, by the way, and frankly has become the most consistent wide receiver of Kansas City down the stretch late in the season and through the playoffs. But I also like pairing that up with a 5.5 rushing yard over. He's been over that actually 4 of the last 5 games, believe it or not. I mean, receiving a jet sweep or 2 has become a staple of this offense. So over 5.5 rushing yards, over 59.5 receiving yards. Adam, are you feeling Xavier worthy?
Yeah, no, I like that one. I mean, it's definitely been a funnel between Worthy and Kelsey for this passing game and really this offense in general. I guess if you just include Kareem Hunt, yeah, I'm with you on Worthy.
He can get that in just with one touch. With his speed, he gets that one touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me throw another Vegas story in there. Now, understand, when you get as many drink tickets as you have, you're saying some things you might not normally say, like if your father-in-law was in the room, right? Anyway, I kept yelling, "I am not Worthy," because I loaded up on Worthy. I just had a feeling I bet him two or three times to score a touchdown. I had his total over. I had everything about him over. And of course, I was Worthy.
That's beautiful. Oh, man. And Chris, help me out with the last 2 that I have here and see how you feel about this one. Kareem Hunt, 43.5 rushing yards. I have the over on this one as well. He's been over that 4 of the last 5 games. And, he's taken over the backfield in the playoffs. He's had 45% of the team carries compared to Pacheco's 18% in the 2 games in the playoffs for Kansas City. Now, this is a tough run defense against the Eagles. There's no doubt about it. But 43.5 rushing yards for a guy who might be getting 15-plus carries, I'm feeling decent about that one. And then also to go with it, Patrick Mahomes, 37.5 pass attempts. I was surprised his number was this high, and is my only under that I'm presenting to you guys in the player props this week. He's attempted 25 and 26 pass attempts the last 2 games in the playoffs. And the Eagles weren't a team that allowed a lot of passing attempts in the regular season either, partly due to their ball controlling offense and partly due to their defense been playing lights out since week 5. They only allowed the 12th least attempts throughout the regular season. I don't think this is a Mahomes toss it out, air it out game where he's getting plus 37.5 pass attempts. So what do you think about Kareem Hunt over 43.5 and Mahomes under 37.5 passing attempts?
Much more confident in the Patrick Mahomes one. I agree with you. The Buffalo game, like I talked about, to me is the blueprint. I think a lot of the ways attack the Eagles, and the passing game was a short passing attack, but you saw the big plays there. Still didn't get 37 attempts. So I think the attempts is when I like the most. Kareem Hunt's tough with me. Yes, he's been close to that number. He gets 15 carries, but he gets around that 40, 45 yards pretty consistently. So that's where it's a little bit more iffy for me. But I like the Patrick Mahomes one.
Well, I'll take it. And hopefully we'll be able to cash all these out. Chaz, is there anything more about this game you want to add here?
Well, I just love the fact that you mentioned every single player that I have in my 14 touchdown parlay. Every one of them you mentioned. So thank you for that.
It's always good when great minds think alike. And with that is
now I will say the one thing I have here that we didn't talk about that I wrote down last year was a great game, right? Remember how it ended? Chase mentioned the hero at the end was somebody that you expect. There was only 3 touchdowns. Last year, there was only 3 touchdowns, 7 field goals. So maybe that field goal over.
Yeah, I like the field goal over. One of the reasons we talked about Chase, we talked about this. I have Harrison Butker in one of my lineups because of those field goals in the Super Bowl game, in a tight game. And I do think this could be low scoring in the first half because sometimes these teams have to feel each other out and they have strong game plans coming in. So I like that, Chaz, quite a bit. But this is actually going to end the 24-25 season with Operation Domination. I want to send a big thank you to everybody who followed us throughout the season. And our first year with the Fantasy Football Advice Network has been absolutely awesome to be there. We'll continue, obviously, being part of the network moving forward. Again, March 5th, you'll be able to catch Operation Domination back at Wednesday, back on 9:30 at night, kicking off the new year in a month from today with the coaching impacts. And we'll talk about how we're going to, style that and everything. But make sure you're following us until then, because we're still going to be active on the Fantasy Sports Advice app, answering questions, talking Dynasty, talking draft, talking combine. I mean, NFL doesn't sleep, and neither are we. We just need a little reprieve to get some new stuff going for Operation Domination. Make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast app, and you can subscribe to our playlists on the Fantasy Football Advice YouTube channel. Chas, thanks so much for coming on, man. What do you want people to check out as we enter the off season for you?
Well, right now we've got our pre-sale running, so both footballs are $20 off, which doesn't seem like a lot. But if you take that $20 and you listen to what we talked about tonight and use that $20 wisely, you're talking free football.
Love it. Love the free football.
ChampionshipFootballs.com.
That's right. Championshipfootballs.com. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about championships, not practice championships. And on that note, we'll see you guys real soon.